25 years ago, an extraordinary movie changed the face of modern cinema. I was 11 years old when The Exorcist opened in America on Boxing Day 1973, and I can remember like yesterday the amazing reaction it caused. You couldn't open a newspaper or turn on the television without coming across some account of audiences queuing all night round the block just to see the film, only to dash out of the theatres, some of them straight into the nearest church.
It deals with very heavy forces, and I was a little worried about what that would mean to work with those.
Of course, on a 15-month schedule, as we had, you certainly expect the laws of probability would presume that certain things would happen. But in my 32 years of making films, I've never had a set burned down. And we did on The Exorcist.
We had a fire, but still a mystery.
The set caught on fire one weekend when no one was there.
I remember that was terrible. Shut down. I think it shut us down for about 6 weeks.
They couldn't find an electrical problem. They couldn't find an arsonist. They couldn't find any substantial reason that occurred.
When I was filming, I would go to this little restaurant, which was in the Jesuit quarters, and sit there and study my lines. I was in there one day, and this very, very old priest, he handed me this little medal of the Blessed Virgin. He said, "You know why I'm giving you this?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I want to tell you something about intervention. Did you ever hear the concept of intervention?" I said, "No." He said, "It's a Gnostic concept. It comes out of the 15th century. If you do anything on the devil, anything at all on the devil, to reveal him as the trickster that he is, he will seek retribution against you. Or he will even try to stop what you're trying to do, to unmask him." And he said, "This medal will protect you." He said, be very careful, you take care of yourself." Maybe about 3 days later, it's kind of catacombed there, the Jesuit estates. And they have all these side rooms, like little sitting rooms, maybe 4 or 5 of them when you walk down the hall. So I'm walking down the hall going to dinner one day, and I walk by, and on the periphery of my mind, I said, "Did I see a casket in there?" And I walk back, and I look in the room, and there's this old priest in a casket, dead.
Just through attrition, I think there was 3 or 4 people died.
There were a couple of unfortunate deaths during the filming.
There were 9 deaths, which is an enormous amount of deaths connected with the film. Some very directly, like the actor Jack McGowan, who gets killed in the film, completed shooting, and died.
It's very simple. If you have a production that lasts 2 weeks or 3 weeks, nothing happens. But if you have a production that lasts for a year or 9 months, a lot of things have to happen. Accidents one way or the other.
Max von Sydow's brother died. The assistant cameraman whose wife had a baby during the shoot, the baby died. The man who refrigerated the set died. The young black night watchman.
And these weren't casualties from stunts or things like that. These were kind of men standing behind a camera all of a sudden, dropping dead.
Of course, it always makes for great stories about what happens, if it was cursed or whatever.
It's very good for publicity, but if you don't believe in devil, you don't believe in curses. Simple.
Then Friedkin called me and said, "Would you come down and exorcise the set?" So I said, "No, Billy, no. I don't want to increase anxiety or anything like that. And we probably are not dealing with anything more than accidents of one kind or another. But what I will do is think of something else." So then I said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Well, I guess they want me to do a Catholic thing." So I went down and I told them all, everybody was there, including the Teamsters, and Max von Sydow had just arrived. And so I gave them a blessing, and then I said, now I'm going to give you my own view of what it's like to do exactly what everybody in this room is doing. All of us are made in the image and likeness of God, and we all mirror him in some way. And what all of you are doing is marvelous. You mirror the creativity of God.
It's a rigging that Marcel Vaucotier came up with that was a mold of my back, and it was like a hard metal. And then they had like a brace around my stomach, and then it was laced up on the sides.
I had her completely strapped in, and I had her.
It was actually manually pumped by some big man on the other side of the wall.
I could throw her up and back, and I had her.
And the lacing came loose while I was being thrown, and so as I went forward, the piece was coming back. So it was a constant. And the dialogue was, please make it stop, it hurts, it burns, whatever.
She started screaming.
I didn't know what to do. And so I'm just yelling, it hurts really, really, and somebody thought I yelled Billy. And I actually never broke character. That's the footage I use in the movie where I'm crying my eyes out because they are brutally damaging my back.
I had a rig around my midriff with a wire coming out the back, and the stuntman was pulling me.
So we took her back the first time, and it was a good shot. And Billy said, we're going to do it again.
I said, Billy, he's pulling me too hard. I can get hurt. And Billy said, well, it has to look real. I said, I understand, but I'm telling you, I could get hurt. And the stuntman was standing there listening to this, and Billy said to him, okay, don't pull her so hard. But as I turned away, I felt them exchange a look.
And he said, give it to her this time. And I said, really? And he says, give it to her. And this is Ellen Burstyn, right? She's a nice lady. And so I said, okay. So when I hauled off, she came completely off her feet.
You see me hit and you see me reach for my back. I screamed in horrendous pain. Billy motioned to Owen to tilt the camera down on me. And I saw it, and I was so furious and said, turn the effing camera off, because I couldn't stand that he was willing to just get a quick shot of it before they called the ambulance, you know.
Ellen didn't like it too well, and she went to see her chiropractor, and chiropractor said, you're all right. Just a couple of days, you'll get over the soreness. But that's show business, I guess.
It was way beyond what anyone needs to do to make a movie.
Well, it was a very difficult film. Billy was reaching for the limit. He was committed to it, and he was obsessed by it himself, and that obsession was contagious.
He knew what to do with this film from the minute that he read the book. And it was his vision, so all of us just participated by doing what he wanted.
Billy didn't kid around. When he said he liked something, he really liked it, you see. He never flattered.
And he knew how to make each one of us work. And that in itself was very interesting, because I got to watch everything from the bed.
And you never knew when he was going to explode or not explode. So there was always a tension on the set.
Oh, come on, shut up in there!
Billy can be totally irascible. Billy has reduced me to tears on more than one occasion.
But he also liked to stimulate the actors. So he would sometimes shoot off a gun or something when he wanted someone to look startled.
And that's really what pissed me off. And I told him, I said, never do that again. You know, I'm an actor. I don't need all these artificial stimulants.
Well, the actors got used to this. And they'd come in the morning, and I had a good relationship with them. And like Max would walk in and say, good morning, Owen. Where are the guns this morning? I said, well, there's a .45 behind that wall and a shotgun behind that one. He said, thank you very much.
Well, I enjoyed very much working with him. Although he used maybe sometimes methods that I was not used to.
My dear friend Billy Friedkin is a maniac, and I love him, but he's a maniac.
Billy would do anything to motivate an actor.
He was tough, but it was very stimulating. He drove me to some of the best work that I'd done up to that time. A makeup artist gets a great thrill changing someone's face because, in a sense, he is creating a new living creature. I was faced with the problem of making this 12-year-old little girl, very pretty little girl with apple cheeks and a butterball nose, make her into a demon. And it was an incredible challenge.
God bless Dick Smith. Certainly nothing could have prepared anybody for what that experience was going to be. First, he had to do the casting of the face. He created different makeups, which we tested.
I think it was 6 different, all different makeups. The very first one I did was a all-out witchy makeup with a black wig and bushy eyebrows, and it was terrible. But it proved one thing, and that was that I could take this round face and make it look pretty horrible. So then it was a matter of kind of backtracking, and I tried. There were several other more moderate makeups. There was one that seemed to be promising. We filmed it, and Billy said, "It's no good. It doesn't work." And the reason, I had to agree, the reason it didn't work was because the dialogue of the other people in the scene didn't match this horror.
One day I had the thought that the disfiguration that results in her face should come from something that Regan did to herself. And I thought, what if in the scene where she's masturbating with a crucifix, we see that her whole face is streaming with blood, fresh blood, as though she had used the crucifix to scar herself.
The makeup, once established, progressed. And here she's got even more wounds and stuff on her face. I had to keep making it worse. The cuts became kind of raised welts or scars, but I placed them very strategically.
Almost like nightmarish shapes, but all growing out of the idea that she scarred herself with the crucifix, and these are gangrenous sores.
And I changed her mouth. I thickened the upper lip, and I gave her a thick, distorted, cracked lower lip that kind of drooped over to one side, and that twisted her mouth.
And then he took a cast of my tongue. And so it was fit on my tongue perfectly, and it was just, I just had to ball it all up and stick it in my mouth. But I mean, it's horrible in the movie. It is, I admit. That's just a horrible, horrible thing to look at.
And Linda looks up to the beautiful blue eyes and that cherubic face and says, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." And Max goes, "Cut." He said, "I've just lost it, Billy. I've just lost it."
So one day I asked her, I said, "Linda, how do you feel when you have to say these lines?" She says, "Oh, it's not me, it's Regan."
Her capability at that age of handling what she went through was remarkable, totally remarkable.
She just divorced herself from this horrible character and even from the language.
I certainly, as an assistant director, felt for this 13-year-old girl who was in makeup for 4 hours every morning before she even got on the floor.
It took hours to light every shot, and so you couldn't keep Linda Blair or another 12-year-old in that rig for hours. Eileen Dietz was about 25 or 26 years old. She was the same size as Linda, who was 12. We'd light Eileen Dietz and get her out and put Linda Blair in to do the scene.
So he may no longer hold captive Mistress.
There are a couple of shots that we did with Eileen Dietz where, like, she backhands the doctor and knocks him across the room and we're behind her. Obviously, Eileen's blow was much more powerful and believable. In the scene where she's masturbating with a crucifix, when the crucifix goes into the crotch area, that's Eileen Dietz.
I didn't ever think they would allow us to film or exhibit the crucifix masturbation scene, and yet I couldn't think of how to do without it.
I didn't understand what masturbation was at that age. So I didn't understand, you know, there was a box and a sponge and Karo syrup with red food coloring. And that was between my legs. So I just had to put the cross into the box. That's all I was doing. I had no idea what it was until many years later.
When I was writing the novel, I said, now I have come to the point where this woman, this non-believer, in desperation, is going to go to priests, to witch doctors. What on earth could drive her to that? What is the worst possible thing I can think of?
I think it was merited, and I think it served a purpose. It was probably one of the most vicious things I've ever seen in a film.
It certainly does make this statement of to what lengths evil will go to manifest.
To this day, even with sensibilities that you think are so utterly jaded and depraved, it remains the most shocking piece of footage I have ever seen.
There were various different effects that had to be done in the script, and one of them was the head turning around backwards. The only way to do it was to make a dummy and have a mechanical head.
We sat down together, and Dick says, if you'll do everything on the inside, I'll do everything on the outside.
The head and the torso are rigid plastic because the head had to rotate smoothly.
The only problem was going to be the separation. But if I spun the head, the hair would come down and cover up the crack. So I could spin the head. I could go around 2-3 times if I wanted to.
Amen.
I worked on the eyes, and I used remote control.
Let my cry come unto thee.
And she would sit there and look at you in the room. It was frightening. It was so alive. In fact, I didn't want to call it a dummy. I quit calling it a dummy because it was embarrassing. I says, I don't want to call you a dummy. We decided we were going to try it out, so put it in the front seat of a taxi in the summertime in New York City.
The head would wobble around, so it would look like it was alive.
And the people would stare at this thing, and then finally it would just spin its head around, and that was it. And then tell the cab, get out of here.
See the cross of the Lord. Begone, you hostile power.
This is the device I made to create the vomiting effect. This side piece is actually a very thin, flat tube, and there's a little nozzle connecting the two. I can take this apart, and the tubes would be hidden behind the head of the person. Actually, it was not Linda Blair, but Eileen Dietz that was used for this rather unpleasant task, and it would fit snugly on her face like this. And then I connected these to a special pump that Marcel Vercouter had loaded with hot pea soup. I understood that what was wanted was a kind of diffused spray, not a single stream. And that's what we did. I didn't learn till years afterwards that in the editing, that Billy didn't like the garden hose type, and he wanted that blob hitting in the face. So it was matted in. That was one of the first optical things that was done.
I was on the other side of the bed with my rig, and I'm supposed to hit Jason in the sweater.
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, geez, might probably better if they really hit me in the face, you know, because it really...
I got all set up, and now they changed the lights, and they did this and that, you know. Pretty soon, I said, maybe my vomit is getting a little cold. So I raised up trajectory a little bit, and I maybe cranked on a little bit. And anyway, when I let go, I hit Jason flush in the face.
My momentary reaction was, yeah, I was a little pissed off.
He went backwards, and he was, if he could have got a hold of me, everybody on the set went, "Ah." And I felt like, and so they said, clean Jason up and we'll do it the right way. So they cleaned him up, got him another sweater, and we shot it 3 or 4 times after that. But then after they started to put it together and they saw the expression on his face, that is actually the one they used. It was a nice mistake. I enjoyed it. Jason didn't.
You remember in the little girl's room, whenever she went demonic, the room became extremely cold.
And of course, how do you make breath show in a room? Today they can draw it in digitally. It's rather expensive, but it's less expensive than what we did.
I got a hold of this refrigeration fella, and I built this giant cocoon.
So we had 4 massive air conditioners, which we found we had to turn on all night. And by the time we got to the set the next morning, it was 30 or 40 below zero.
He wanted to see the breath of the actors, and I think also in the back of his mind he decided that the extreme cold would really influence the performance as well.
It was difficult to act and express facially emotions when your face was frozen, literally.
The perspiration was freezing on my hair was frozen.
One morning, we had a lovely surprise. We came in and found that there was like a thin, thin layer of snow over the entire set. That somehow a lot of moisture had gotten into the atmosphere and it had condensed.
Be silent!
We're all there in our Arctic cold weather Eddie Bauer special, suits, and she's in her nightie.
It's the power! Holy water!
Was it cold? Yes. Did I like it? Not much. It's probably why I hate cold so much nowadays. I was cold, yeah.
For the first time, I said to myself, you got principal actors, not in Alaska, not in an ice house, on the set in the middle of the summer in New York City, seeing breath.
But every time Owen would turn his lights on to light a shot, the temperature of the room would increase.
And after maybe an hour and a half of filming, the temperature would go above freezing, so you had to shut down, shut off all the lights, and build up the cold again.
And this would go on, for days and days and days and days. We were in that cold room for 60 days.
The head of production of Warner Brothers came in from time to time, flew in to see why it was taking us so long to do this, and he would stand in the back of the set just shaking his head with his mouth. He couldn't believe, and no one really could believe this was going on or that would ever produce anything like a believable result.
When the arduous process of filming was completed, William Friedkin brought The Exorcist here to the appropriately numbered location of 666 Fifth Avenue. It was here that a team of editors laboured to whittle down over 200 days of shooting into a coherent 2-hour movie.
We approached The Exorcist not like a horror film. It was more of a combination of Billy Friedkin's background of being a documentarian as well as a theater, a director, and a live director.
When I started the film, I had no idea how we were going to do the demon voice.
And Billy pulled out a book of Hieronymus Bosch paintings and said, I want Linda Blair's voice to sound like Hieronymus Bosch. Didn't necessarily make total sense to me, but the impression was that Linda Blair's voice should be a kind of chorus of voices. And at the center of it should be whatever we in general consider to be evil.
Who are you?
No one there.
We took Linda Blair's voice in the pre-production, and we spent 150 hours making Linda Blair's voice into a different voice.
Your mother's in here with us, Karis.
We made her sound bad, evil.
And I'm the devil!
We played the stuff for Friedkin, and he turned around and he said, that's no good. I thought, oh, fuck, 150 hours of work just out the window.
Billy just thought another voice would be better than trying to treat Reagan's into some electronic system, which we didn't really have technically at that time.
I started to verbalize to Bill and others that the demon should not in any way be a man's voice, but it should be a kind of neutral voice, neither male nor female, but with male characteristics, but with female characteristics. Who the hell sounds like that? Who has ever sounded like that? And the name Mercedes McCambridge came into my mind's eye. She was a great actress and had this most distinguished voice. We gave her raw eggs and whiskey, and she started chain smoking, and I lashed her to a chair.
Now kindly undo these straps.
The most curious things would happen in her throat. Double and triple sounds would emerge at once. Wheezing sounds, very much akin to what you could imagine a person inhabited by various demons would sound like. Were created in front of an open mic by a Mexican peasant who had no shoes.
The power of Christ compels you!
The original composer was Lalo Schifrin, and Billy Friedkin had brought Lalo in to screen the film.
And there was a lot of pretentious ooga booga about, the kind of presence or feeling or vibe that the music was supposed to have.
Lalo said, "Trust me, it'll be wonderful." So he went away and he wrote the score of The Exorcist.
When the time came, it was like, I don't know how many people were out there, like, 100 of LA's finest musicians strike up the band.
And anyhow, Lalo's sitting there with his chest out, and they play this score. It's a beautiful score, but it was all over. It was kind of a silence.
And it was like, get this fucking Brand X Stravinsky out of here. I mean, he went apeshit. Billy did.
So they stopped the recording right in the middle. I mean, you have 110 guys standing there, and you just say, go home.
And fired him right there on the spot with his wife and his agent and everybody. I mean, it was like that's it.
And Billy says, give me that music. So we took the music off the recorder, handed it to him. He ran out in the front of the Tadeo and threw it across the street into the parking lot. He said, that's where that music belongs.
Billy said to me, did you ever hear of a record called Tubular Bells? I said, yeah, Mike Oldfield. He says, go up and get that.
After cutting the opening sequence of Iraq, we kind of went through the whole film and repaced it. Looking at it, I thought, well, there's a lot of exposition, basically, that you really don't need because it's slowing the film down, like taking a walk with Reagan through Washington, seeing all the monuments. Sequences like that didn't pertain really to where this film was going.
The transition to how she would have reacted right on top of that to the spider walk.
Bill, it may have been could be a problem in the writing. I really mean that, because what you're asked to do there is deal with a double climax.
Well,
Either
three.
one is the end of the scene.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
I just thought of how I should have written it, Bill. Actually, the moment she hears the words, Burke's dead, there should have been a scream instantly from Sharon, Chris, before there's any time to react to that, and then boom.
That would have been great.
Oh, God.
Take two, one slide.
Billy stayed in New York, and I had to go to the screening. And it was the first time anyone had seen the film but the filmmakers. And there was only 5 executives allowed to come to the screening, and there was a guard at the door.
We all look at the movie, and it's a shocker. It's a shocker.
All the executives got up and they just looked at each other and didn't know what to say.
There was one gentleman, a high-level executive, who suggested that that it might be best if we shelved the film and never distributed it.
They were really, I think, torn about the power of it.
He thought it was just totally obscene and should not be shown to people.
And they said, we have to call Billy Friedkin right now, and they all just walked out of the door.
They talked about it for about 5 minutes and shut down that idea.
The next thing I heard, Billy was on an airplane coming to Los Angeles to finish the film. If they didn't like it, he was going to stay in New York.
The first time I saw the film was at a sneak preview, and I sat next to Billy. And I remember we held hands and practically broke each other's fingers with the tightness of the grip.
The film started, it's just a natural opening with the Iraq sequence, a la kind of documentary feeling. And then it gets into the Georgetown, and it gets a little more intense.
But close enough, what I heard her saying was, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
People started screaming at the screen. They started hiding and ducking, and some people were running up the aisles to get out.
And when it was over, nobody applauded. Everybody just sat there. They didn't know what they had seen.
And my heart sank. I said, we're dead. We're dead.
7 or 8 of our top executives are seated alone in the theater. Joe, what happened here tonight? I don't know, fellas. Why were people running up and down the aisles? They were getting sick. What do you mean getting sick? They were getting sick physically. They were throwing up. Okay, what else happened? Fellas, I don't know what happened tonight. I saw the same film. All I tell you is the other 900 people who saw this film are all congregated outside this theater, talking. Not one person has gotten in their car to leave yet. That's what you got, fellas. That's your movie.
They didn't know if it was going to be an art house film or a little horror film or whether they were going to take a bath. You know, they really didn't know what they had. And until the public started telling them what they had.
I remember the day that it opened, being in my kitchen and turning on the television and seeing people who had been in line for 4 hours before the movie theater opened in a blizzard.
It was really volcanic when it first came out. They only opened in New York in one theater, and they were literally lined up around, I think, 2 or 3 blocks.
We never had enough theaters, so we had to add theaters nightly to it, for the lines.
And it was in every newspaper, magazine.
Which is what happens on an event kind of movie. It just transcends anything that any publicist or marketing people could do.
I was getting calls from all over the place. I mean, people wanted me to exorcise their daughters, exorcise their cat, exorcise their house.
But I got a call from Warner Brothers again, from London, saying, would I please go up to Milano? Because they were opening the next night, and they heard that already the whole city was in an uproar. And so they wanted to have a psychiatrist and myself present to deal with the uproar in the city.
Power to move you and have a disturbing effect upon the viewer, which is greater than the sum of any of its parts. It's enormous, and it's mysterious. But my God, it's not a power of evil.